Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome to the channel. I had a really good reading month in September, so let me go and tell you all about it. I don't know what it was, but I guess I got really lucky, and all the books that I finished in September, I really enjoyed. It's the best reading month in terms of quality I can remember having for quite a while. It's certainly the highest scoring in terms of average rating this year. I haven't checked back against last year, but I wouldn't be surprised if it beats every individual month that I had last year as well. I did have one DNF, but I've finished 5 books, and I'll go through the stats for those 5 books in just a second. As usual, I'll put chapters down below, so if you want to skip the stats and move straight on to the books, you can do so. But for the 5 books that I've finished, I ended up with a total of 2,184 pages read, taking me to a year-to-date total of 20,460. The average page count for the books that I've finished last month was 437, so year-to-date that's now 483. And then the average rating, what I was really happy about, it was at 4.4 for September, so the year-to-date average rating has now crept above 4 as well. It's on 4.01. I can't remember ever being at this point of the year so far through the 12 months and having an average rating that's actually gone above 4. So I'm really excited to see what I'll end up with at the end of the year. Hopefully I've got some really good books waiting that'll keep it around that same spot. As far as the series stats go, I've now started 19 different series in 2024. I've only finished 3 of them so far. There are more to come. Nearly got a 4th one this month as well, but I didn't quite finish The Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne, so that'll be in next month's wrap up. I've got 5 series that I've read the first book of and decided I'm not going to continue with book 2. There are 21 series that I'm up to date with. I've read the most recently published book, and then there are 41 in total that I consider to be ongoing. So when the next book does come out, I will read it, or I haven't finished reading the available books at the moment, but I do plan to at some point. And then the day since my last 5-star read, well, you probably guessed from what I've been saying about it, but I did have one in September, so that's now sitting at 19 days. Alright, so let's move into the books, and as usual I'll start with the DNF, and this one was an audiobook. And it's The Court of Broken Knives by Anna Smith Spark. This one I've had a couple of people recommend to me. I was looking forward to reading it. The opening chapter, which I read as one of my sort of sample videos a little while ago, was quite intriguing. I was on board with it. The writing style was absolutely fine for me. That's probably the one thing that people say as a negative about this book, but it wasn't an issue for me. What I did find to be an issue was, and I suppose maybe in a different way you can link this to the writing style, it was just the overall book itself. I wasn't into it. It just didn't grab me. It didn't get my interest whatsoever, I'm afraid. So I listened to this on audiobook, and there are 2 main point of view. It's dual narration with a male and a female narrator. The first, 8-9 chapters were a male narrator, and I just wasn't on board. I didn't kind of jive, I guess, with his voice. It just wasn't doing anything for me. It was almost lulling me to sleep a little bit because I wasn't invested in the story, and the voice was just that sort of voice that, if you're not really paying attention, if you're not really excited to hear what he's saying, can be a little bit droning. So that's not a good thing. When the female narrator came in after those 8-9 or so chapters, it was like a breath of fresh air, and I did actually enjoy it. The character that we were seeing this chapter from the point of view of, I was actually interested in her story, but it only lasted for 1 chapter, and then we switched perspectives again. By the time I DNF'd this one, I put it down at 26%, about 120 or so pages through in terms of the paperback. We'd only had 2 single chapters from the female point of view with the second narrator, so I decided at that point, I'm not really getting on with this. I'm not taking it in because the narrator isn't doing it for me, and the story that he's telling also wasn't doing it for me. So I don't really have a vast amount to say for this one, I'm afraid, except for the fact that it turned out not to be for me, and it's really just, for what I read of it, not a memorable one, I'm afraid to say. So Court of Broken Knives was sadly a miss for me, but then after that one we get on to the books which were definitely hits. So I'm going to start off with a sci-fi. This one was just a random pickup. I looked at Mike Brooks because I really enjoyed his fantasy series for God King Chronicles, and I wanted to see what else he had available. I knew he had various Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000 works available for the Black Library, but he's also got a sci-fi kind of smuggler series, far future space opera-ish smuggler series called Keiko, which is the name of a ship, and I read book one, which was called Darkron. This one was, I described it as a bit of a reverse heist, because instead of going in and sort of sneaking into a location, stealing something and then getting away without being caught, they were going in, sneaking into a location to deliver an item and then planning to get away without anyone knowing they were there. So it's a little bit different, and of course, as things go in these type of stories, it didn't all go to plan and everything really kicked off. I really enjoyed this story. I just thought it was not quite a breath of fresh air, but it was something a little bit different. It was something that excited me. I was really on board with the overall story and the kind of the setting and what did go wrong and what they did to kind of turn that around to their advantage and to stay ahead of those who were chasing them, and of course, as much as possible, keep their own lives intact. The story itself probably took second place for me in terms of what I most enjoyed about this, because there was just one particular character who really worked for me. She was a slicer, which is kind of the tech wizard, the ones who kind of go into the systems and get all the idents for the ship so they can go incognito, try to bully their way through the systems to open doors for either themselves or their colleagues who are elsewhere. I really enjoyed her chapters. I thought that she's kind of a really sassy, kick-ass character, not in a physical way, but in what she does on the systems and the way that she talks as she's doing that, I thought was really good. There was a kind of a section where she's undercover and she's not really experienced, but she's pretending that she is, and I just thought it worked really well. I could really see that on screen, either in a movie or in a TV show. It's just one of those kind of tropes that I think really works as long as it's done well, and it definitely was done well here. I do have a video review of it, which I'll link in the cards. I haven't done that for a while, but if you want to go and check out my thoughts in a little bit more detail, do go and have a look at that video. Mike Brooks is one of my favourite authors from the books that I've read of him. This one was no exception, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Then I moved on to another audiobook. This was Master of Furies by Raymond D. Feist, book 3, the final book in the series, the Firemane Saga. So this is one of my finished series for the year so far. I had a great time with this one. I am a fan of Feist. I liked the Riftwar Saga and the overall Riftwar cycle indeed, which is the expanded kind of series of series with about 30 odd different books in it in total. This one does have a link to the Riftwar cycle, and it's just this final book really that sells us that link. Towards the end of the book there are just a couple of things basically. If you're aware of the Riftwar cycle, if you've read them, you know the characters and the locations, you will recognise them, but if you're not, if you haven't read anything and it's all brand new to you, it's not going to be something that spoils it for you. It's not kind of knowledge that you need to have going into it. It's quite nice in that way because it's almost like an Easter egg basically. If you don't know about it, you'll get on fine. If you do know about it, it just gives you that little something extra. So you get people coming in and it's cameos rather than just random little characters who are just being introduced for the first time to the world. Overall, I thought the third book in the series wasn't quite as good as the second. It was a little bit of a letdown because there were a couple of things that I didn't like about it quite as much. It kind of, it went a little bit slower in a couple of places, but it did have one of the things that I don't like too much, which is kind of a magical training scenario. Here though, I thought it was done really well. It wasn't in a typical school setting or anything along those lines. But I liked the way that they showed some of the magic, as this character was essentially kind of making it up as he went along, because even his mentors, the people who they brought in to teach him his magic, they hadn't come across anyone as powerful as him. He could do things that even they didn't know about, and he was just, I guess kind of using their guidance on how to do things, but he was taking it to a whole another level. And I liked how it was used to interact with people who we knew from other parts of the story in completely different parts of the world, but he could still reach across the miles and help them out using his magic. I really enjoyed that. I thought it made for some really good and intense scenes, even though by the second time it happened, it wasn't new anymore. We'd already seen it, so it was less kind of fresh, it was less inventive, and it was less intense as well, because we kind of knew that it was likely to be all okay, because we'd seen it before. Overall though, the series was great. It's one of my favourite recent series that I've completed. I am a bit down on completed series. There haven't been too many of them over the last few years, but this one was a good one, and I'm glad to have finished it off. I gave this one, again, 4.5 stars. The next book I finished was Hall of Bones. This is book one of The Brotherhood of the Eagle by Tim Hardy. Tim's an author who joined me in the advent of winter, writing a short story for my winter anthology last Christmas, and I really enjoyed that story, and it made me want to read more of Tim's work, and that's exactly what I wanted for the anthology as a whole. It was a way to introduce readers to new authors who they could then go on and experience more that the authors had written. So Tim Hardy's work, this series wasn't one that I was originally planning on reading. I read the opening chapter a couple of years ago now of this particular book when Hall of Bones was a finalist in SPFBO 7. I thought it was good, but I wasn't immediately sold. I don't think I was in the right place at the time to read a Norse-inspired fantasy. It wasn't really my thing. I've read a few since, I've quite enjoyed them. And all of that put together with enjoying A Cold Broad River, which was his story in the advent of winter, that just told me to get on board and try Hall of Bones. And I'm really glad I did, because I absolutely loved it. There are a few kind of fantasy tropes that you see quite a bit, rather than being the rarer tropes, because, you know, everything's a trope really, but this one did have some of the really popular tropes that we do see quite a lot, but I like how he kind of twisted them around a bit and put his own little design on them, basically. So everything was still kind of new, even though we'd seen things that were similar to various aspects of this particular book. Overall, I think it was a really good setting, a really good story. I had some characters I really enjoyed. There were a couple of little things that I wasn't quite on board with, but the rest of the book, the way it all pulled together, did such a good job that I just had a really good time with it overall. I'm still kind of pulling all my thoughts together on this one as I consider when I'm going to go for book 2 in this series, and what I'm planning to do is a bit more of a detailed video review for either book 1 Hall of Bones or for the entire series once I've read it. Book 4 is coming out imminently, so you will be able to complete the series soon if you have got up to book 3 already. This one, as I said, I had a really good time with, even if I'm rambling my way through talking about it, because I don't want to give too much away. I don't want to say too much, especially if I do a dedicated review for it. But I had a really good time. I really recommend it if you like epic fantasy, if you like Norse-inspired fantasy. It's definitely one that you should give a go. I gave this one 5 stars. It's a rare 5-star for me this year, but I think it was a fully deserved one. Then I finished up the month with a couple of audiobooks, because those have been easier for me to get through just recently. After I DNF'd A Court of Broken Knives, I decided to pick up another one that I put forward in my Patreon vote. This one came second, and it was The Queen's Assassin by James Barclay. I like James Barclay's writing. I haven't read any for a long time, because he's not really released anything for quite a while. And then I just randomly saw this one last year, I think it was, taken me by surprise, and I decided to pick it up. This is a kind of again, a similar trope to what we've seen in various other fantasies lately. It's quite a bit of a, not necessarily a trend, I suppose it is a trend, but not a big one, where you've got magic is being outlawed, it's been forbidden, you can be executed or at least put in jail if you practice magic. Here we kind of see the early stages of it. We see the initial unrest, the mistrust of magic users, and you've got the lawmakers who are trying to put various restrictions on them, moving on towards the end of the book where they try to properly outlaw it and make it make it an offence that they can execute you for if you use magic. The only magic that you really see in here, and I'm really still not sure if it's the only magic in this world or if it's just what we have to focus on here because of the subject matter, but we have medical magic basically. So the main character is an army field medic, the best in the business. She gets called to the capital to basically be the Queen's personal physician, and she's thrown into the real politics of it as well as the actual medicinal side of the magic. No one knows that she is magic. She's hiding that for various reasons, not just because of the mistrust and the politics behind it all, but there are historical reasons for her individually as well, which you learn quite early on in the book. I thought this was really well done overall. I really liked the character. I liked the voice of the narration and also the voice of the character. It was again that kind of sassy attitude that pretty much works well for me. If it's done well, it was done well here. The supporting characters I quite liked as well. I liked a few of the little twists. There were some that you could see kind of from a mile off basically. As soon as they suggested there might be something here, I was thinking, I bet that's X, and it turned out that it was. There were also some twists that I did not see coming at all, so I think they were really well hidden. They were not. They weren't really signposted. They didn't really have the clues there for you to pick them up. But there were some bits where you wanted an answer basically, and there were no clues as to what that answer would be. And when the answer came along, it hit pretty hard for me. I thought it was a really well done little twist because of that. I wasn't expecting that to be the answer at all. So yeah, it was a job well done in that sense. I think the ending did let this one down a little bit because it was kind of abrupt. We had the climax, basically the big, if you want to call it, the big battle. It was a mix between a physical and a political battle all at the same time. And when that finished, the book pretty much finished. There was no fall in action. It was essentially, right, the battle's over, let's get to work. And then the book finished. So they didn't even change locations. They didn't even leave the room that they were in for this this final kind of big action scene. So that was kind of disappointing to me. I wanted a little bit more just to cool down after that action. As I say, the falling action that I would have expected to see wasn't there in this one. So never mind. This one was a good book overall, though, with that a couple of bits within the book and that ending especially being a bit too abrupt for me, just took it down slightly in my ratings, but it still landed at 4 stars, which is a really good result. And then because I had a little bit of time left in the end of the month, I decided to pick up a short audiobook. So I went for The Rose and the Thorn, book 2 of the Rhaenyra Chronicles by Michael J. Sullivan. I left this series for a long time. In fact, I did have it in my last kind of series update, I guess. I had this one down as a soft DNF because I just didn't see when I was going to pick it up. But I enjoyed the first book when I eventually got to it randomly a few months ago. And the same can be said for this one. This did take me a little while to get into because I've got 2 of my favourite characters, Royce and Hadrian, who form the majority of Rhaenyra. It's a group, but they are basically the face of Rhaenyra. They weren't really in it at the start of the book. It's got quite long chapters, and the first chapter featured someone completely different, someone I didn't know, and it just seemed to go on for quite a while, and it didn't have the feel of a Rhaenyra book because of that, because there was no Royce and Hadrian. There was none of the kind of banter that you have with those. Some of these new characters who came in from that opening chapter did actually have some really good banter as their chapters went on, and I quite enjoyed that. But of course, after a couple of chapters, we did get right back into the theme of it, into the overall vibe of it being a Royce and Hadrian book. The story was quite narrowly contained. There weren't many offshoots to it. Everything was pretty much following one main theme. A couple of different bits around it turned out to be all very tightly linked to this one theme, rather than having little subplots in the kind of typical sense. But it worked quite well. If you've got a good storytelling technique, you've got some good characters, and the overall story itself is very intriguing, you can do that and you can survive on it because you don't need an expansive kind of epic scenario to make the story work. That's exactly what I got here. I think Michael J. Sullivan, by the time he wrote this book, he's honed his craft pretty well. He knows what he's doing, and he really knows this world and also these characters really, really well. So anything that he does right is generally going to be a hit because he knows what he's doing. If you get on with his work and with his world and his characters, there's nothing not to like here, basically. I'm in that boat. I had a good time with this one. I liked the overall story. There were some surprises in it, some bits that I wasn't really expecting, but the way they worked out, I thought they were pretty well done, and I was happy with how it did all pan out. So this is another one that I gave 4 stars to, and at some point, whenever I get to it, I am looking forward to book 3 and book 4 in the Rhaenyra Chronicles. So those are the books that I read, 5 finished books and 1 DNF in September. It was a great month for me. I'm really, really happy with how it went. I am halfway through The Fury of the Gods. That would have been in this wrap up, but I just had a slow physical reading month at the end of the month, so I didn't get to finish that. But that one, spoiler alert, is going to be a decent score as well. I don't know what it is yet because I'm only halfway through, but that would, I'm sure, have been around about the same ballpark figure as the 5 books that I finished. So a great time recently after maybe some slightly lower months earlier on in this year. So happy days for me. What about you? Let me know in the comments down below how your reading month went in September, and hopefully you'll have had a good month and you'll be having another good month for October's reading. That's everything for me today. I'll hopefully see you in the next video sometime soon. Until then, as always though, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.